Imagine a building of impossible scale. Its foundations are stones the size of trucks, some over 40 feet long, gleaming white under the Mediterranean sun. The Jewish historian Josephus, who saw it with his own eyes, said that plates of gold adorned its face, catching the light with such brilliance that approaching visitors had to look away as if staring into the sun itself. This isn't a fantasy. This was the temple in Jerusalem. While not one of the official 7 wonders of the ancient world, its sheer grandeur was legendary. It was the heart of a nation, believed to be the dwelling place of God on earth, and for all intents and purposes, it was considered indestructible. Now, imagine standing before this architectural marvel and hearing a man next to you say quietly, "Do you see all these great buildings? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." You'd think he was insane. Yet, this is precisely what Jesus of Nazareth told his disciples just days before his crucifixion. And in just 40 years, a single generation, this magnificent structure would be a smoldering ruin. The city around it devastated, and an entire way of life extinguished forever. This wasn't just a random act of war. For millions, it was the chillingly precise fulfillment of a prophecy. What did Jesus see coming? What were the signs he warned about? And what does their terrifying fulfillment in history tell us about our own future? Because the same prophecy that saw a city reduced to rubble might also contain a blueprint for the end of the world itself. To get the sheer gravity of this prophecy, we have to go back to that moment. It's the final week of Jesus' ministry. He's just delivered a blistering rebuke to the religious leaders inside the temple courts, a place buzzing with the energy of the upcoming Passover festival. As he and his disciples leave the complex, his followers may be trying to lighten the mood, or maybe just starstruck by their surroundings point out the grandeur of the temple buildings. Josephus described the temple as looking like a mountain of white stone from a distance, a truly breathtaking sight. It's right then that Jesus drops his bombshell. "Not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." The statement is so absolute, so final, it must have left them reeling. How could that even be possible? The temple wasn't just a building. It was the anchor of their universe. In their minds, its destruction was tied to the most cataclysmic event they could imagine, the end of the world. They cross the Kidron Valley and climb the Mount of Olives, which gives them a panoramic postcard view of the very temple whose doom they just heard. Away from the crowds, in a moment of private confusion and fear, they come to Jesus with a 2-part question that sets the stage for everything to follow. First, tell us, when will these things be? Talking about the temple's destruction. And second, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? In their minds, these 2 events were inseparable. The end of the temple had to mean the end of everything. Jesus' answer, known as the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, is one of the most complex and debated passages in the Bible. He proceeds to answer both questions at once, weaving together 2 timelines into a single, terrifying tapestry. He gives them signs that would announce the coming destruction of Jerusalem, a disaster that would happen in their own lifetimes. But he also embeds within that prophecy the signs of a much bigger future event, his second coming and the final judgment of the world. Many theologians call this idea dual fulfillment or prophetic telescoping. Imagine looking at 2 mountain peaks from a distance. One is near, the other is far, but from your perspective, they almost look stacked one behind the other. It's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. This is how Jesus lays out his prophecy. He describes events that would have an immediate historical fulfillment in the 1st century, but which also serve as a pattern, a type, for a final world-ending fulfillment at the end of time. So to decipher the blueprint for the future, we have to become historians first. We must examine the horrifyingly accurate fulfillment of the first part of this prophecy, the signs that came before the day. Roman armies surrounded a holy city and burned its heart to the ground. The events of AD 70 aren't just an ancient tragedy. They're a warning, a case study, and fulfilled prophecy that validates the parts yet to come. The disciples asked for signs, and Jesus gave them signs. The world, and Jerusalem specifically, was about to experience a series of convulsions that would prove every one of his words true. The 40 years after Jesus' prophecy weren't peaceful. They were a slow-motion collapse into chaos, a perfect storm of political oppression, religious fanaticism, and bitter internal strife. The seeds of Jerusalem's destruction weren't sown by the Romans alone. They were cultivated inside the city walls, by its own people. Jesus began his list of signs with a warning. See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. The first-century historian Flavius Josephus, our primary non-biblical source for this period, documents this with unnerving clarity. Judea in the decades before the fall was a hotbed of messianic claims and insurrection. A man named Theudas rose up, claiming he could part the Jordan River. Another man, known only as the Egyptian, gathered thousands of followers on the same Mount of Olives where Jesus gave his prophecy, promising to make Jerusalem's walls fall at his command. These were just two of many figures who rose and fell, leading desperate people to their deaths and fanning the flames of rebellion. Next, Jesus warned, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. While wars were common, the period between AD 30 and AD 70 saw a notable spike in instability across the Roman Empire. But more pointedly, this described the internal state of Judea itself. Nation against nation was happening within the Jewish population. Josephus paints a grim picture of a society tearing itself apart. Radical revolutionary groups, especially the Zealots and the ultra-violent Sicarii, literally daggermen, gained power. They believed any cooperation with Rome was a betrayal of God and that violent revolution was the only way. They didn't just target Romans. They assassinated fellow Jews they saw as collaborators. The Roman historian Tacitus confirms this, writing that Jerusalem became divided among 3 different warlords and their armies, each fighting the others for control, even as the Romans loomed. The city fell into a brutal civil war. Josephus laments that the infighting was far crueler than the enemy outside the walls. Jesus continued, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Again, history provides the receipts. The book of Acts mentions a great famine that swept the known world during the reign of Emperor Claudius. Josephus also mentions this famine. Earthquakes are common in that region along the Jordan River Valley fault line, and historical records mention significant seismic activity across the empire during this time. But the most personal sign Jesus gave was this: then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. This started almost immediately with the stoning of Stephen and the execution of the apostle James. Then, in AD 64, a great fire destroyed much of Rome. The Emperor Nero, looking for a scapegoat, blamed the young Christian community. This sparked the first empire-wide, state-sanctioned persecution. Christians were arrested, tortured, and killed in horrific ways for sport. The apostles Peter and Paul are both thought to have been martyred during this wave of terror. Being a Christian became a capital offense. They were hated and hunted just as Jesus had said. Each signed false messiahs, civil war, famine, earthquakes. Persecution was a contraction, a birth pang of the horror to come. For those living through it, the world must have felt like it was unraveling. The political situation in Judea finally hit its breaking point. A series of corrupt Roman governors pushed the people too far. In AD 66, after a governor plundered the temple treasury, full-scale revolt exploded. Amazingly, the early stages of the rebellion went well for the Jews. They overwhelmed the Roman garrison in Jerusalem and even defeated a legion sent from Syria. This victory was intoxicating. It seemed to prove the Zealots right. God was on their side, and they could throw off the world's greatest military power. In reality, it sealed their doom. They had kicked the hornet's nest. Emperor Nero sent his most ruthless general Vespasian with a force of some 60,000 soldiers. Vespasian was methodical. He didn't march on Jerusalem. He started a slow, grinding campaign in the north, crushing the rebellion region by region and pushing a flood of refugees toward the capital. The noose was tightening. Then something strange happened. In AD 68, Nero was overthrown and committed suicide, plunging Rome into a chaotic civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Vespasian, seeing his chance, paused his campaign in Judea and turned his eyes to Rome. For over a year, the war against the Jews was on hold. This lull was critical. For the Zealots in Jerusalem, it seemed like a miracle. But for the Christians inside the city, it was the fulfillment of a very different kind of sign, a final window to escape. By AD 69, Vespasian was the undisputed emperor of Rome. He left the unfinished business in Judea to his son, Titus, with the full authority of the emperor behind him. Titus marched on Jerusalem in the spring of AD 70 with one goal: end the rebellion and make an example of the city that dared to defy Rome. His timing was strategically brutal. He began the siege just before Passover. Pilgrims from all over had flooded into Jerusalem, swelling its population to catastrophic levels. The historian Tacitus estimated 600,000 people were trapped, while Josephus put the number even higher at over 1 million. While ancient historians often exaggerated, even a smaller number meant that what was supposed to be a holy city of celebration was about to become the world's largest open-air prison. Here, the prophecies of Jesus get terrifyingly specific. Luke's account of the discourse contains a stark warning. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. For 4 years, the war had been elsewhere. Now it was at the gates. The standards of 4 Roman legions were planted in the soil overlooking the city. The sign was unmistakable. Titus brought the full might of the Roman war machine. Giant catapults hurled stones weighing around 75 pounds over 200 yards into the city, crushing anyone they hit. Battering rams pounded the gates. Inside the walls, things were beyond grim. The civil war that had raged before the Romans arrived kept going. Rival Jewish factions fought each other for control of dwindling resources. In a fit of strategic madness, one faction deliberately burned the city's vast stores of grain, food that could have sustained the population for years. This single act condemned Jerusalem to famine. This is where the prophecy enters its most ghastly phase. Jesus had spoken of a great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. For those trapped in Jerusalem, this wasn't theology. It was daily life. Josephus, an eyewitness from the Roman camp, provides a report so horrific it's hard to read. As the famine took hold, society collapsed. He writes of relatives fighting to the death over scraps of food. People ate anything: belts, shoes, leather stripped from their shields. Gangs roamed the streets, torturing anyone they suspected of hiding food. The dead piled up so fast they were eventually just thrown over the city walls. The climax of this horror is the story of a woman named Mary. Driven mad by starvation, she killed her infant son, roasted his body, and ate half. When zealot gangs burst in, drawn by the smell, she offered them the other half. Even these hardened killers, Josephus writes, left in shock. The news spread through the city and to the Roman camp, extinguishing any pity Titus might have had. The Romans pushed forward, street by street. The final stand was the Temple Mount itself, which had become a fortress. The fighting was desperate, raging in the holy courts. Josephus claims Titus wanted to preserve the temple as a trophy, but in the chaos of the final assault, a Roman soldier, against orders, grabbed a torch and threw it into one of the temple's windows. The dry wood inside caught fire instantly. Josephus describes a scene of chaos, with the hill boiling in a mass of flame and a stream of blood more copious than the fire. The inferno was so hot that the temple's gold and silver decorations melted, running into the cracks between the massive foundation stones. After the battle, Roman soldiers, in their greed to get every last drop of precious metal, did something remarkable. They took long bars and pried apart the great stones of the temple and its foundations, one by one. Not one stone here will be left on another. The prophecy was fulfilled with terrifying precision. The greed of common soldiers accomplished what an order might never have. The main temple building was systematically and completely dismantled. The heart of Judaism was gone. By September of AD 70, the slaughter was over. Titus ordered what was left of the city to be razed, leaving only a few towers standing as a monument to the army that had conquered it. Jerusalem was effectively wiped from the map. The human cost was staggering. Josephus claimed 1.1 million people died, with 97,000 sold into slavery. While modern historians believe these numbers are likely exaggerated, the death toll was still a demographic catastrophe, likely in the hundreds of thousands. Captives were paraded in Titus's triumphal procession in Rome, an event still commemorated on the Arch of Titus today. On it, you can see the haunting image of Roman soldiers carrying away spoils from the temple. Most famously, the Great Golden Menorah. It is a stone monument to a fulfilled prophecy. The city was in ruins. The sacrificial system, the center of Jewish worship for centuries, was gone. It was the end of an age. But it was not the end of everyone. Matthew's account adds the urgency. Let those who are on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house. In other words, when you see the sign, don't pack, just run. According to the 4th century church historian Eusebius, this is exactly what the Christian community in Jerusalem did. He writes that the leaders of the Jerusalem church, remembering the Lord's warning, led their community out of the city before the final siege. They fled to a town called Pella, across the Jordan River. While this event is a historical tradition not confirmed by 1st century sources, the timing makes sense. The most logical window was during that strange lull in the war between AD 68 and 69. While the Jewish zealots saw the Roman withdrawal as a sign of victory, the Christians could have seen it as the divine signal to flee. Think about the implications. By taking Jesus' words literally, the Christians would have completely escaped the horrors that befell the city. While others suffered famine and the sword, the people who followed the man who predicted it could have been safe in the mountains. This demonstrates a key truth about this kind of prophecy. It's not for mere speculation. It's given as a life-saving warning. Those who put their faith in nationalism, military might, or the perceived indestructibility of their institutions perished. Those who put their faith in the words of Jesus lived. The destruction of AD 70 drew a thick black line in history, closing one chapter of redemptive history and forcing the world to reckon with the next. The ashes of Jerusalem in AD 70 provide the firmest possible ground for taking biblical prophecy seriously. The terrifying and precise fulfillment of Jesus' predictions about the city's fall serves as a divine seal of authenticity on the entire Olivet discourse. If he was right about that generation, we have to ask, what about the parts of the prophecy that didn't happen in AD 70? This brings us back to dual fulfillment. Many scholars believe the destruction of Jerusalem was a historical dress rehearsal for a future global tribulation that will precede the second coming. The pattern of events, the signs, the nature of the tribulation, it's all a blueprint. Let's look back at the disciples' original question. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus answers this by describing things that simply did not find their ultimate fulfillment in the 1st century. He speaks of the gospel being preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. While the gospel had spread through the Roman world by AD 70, it had certainly not reached all nations in the modern sense. This points to a future global scale. Then Jesus mentions the abomination of desolation. While some see a partial fulfillment in the desecration of the temple by Roman armies, many scholars see this as pointing to a future, singular event that will trigger the final crisis. Most telling are the cosmic signs Jesus describes after the tribulation. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven. While historians mention some strange omens before Jerusalem's fall, they weren't the universe-altering celestial collapse Jesus describes. This is a sign of a completely different magnitude. And finally, the climax. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and they will gather his elect from the four winds. This did not happen in AD 70. The Son of Man did not appear on the clouds for the whole world to see. This part of the prophecy is unambiguously about the future. So what's the connection? The signs that preceded AD 70 are the same kind of signs that will precede the end. Jesus calls them birth pains. It's a powerful metaphor. Birth pains start mild and infrequent, but as the time of birth gets closer, they increase in frequency and intensity. Wars, famines, earthquakes, persecution, the rise of deceivers. These things have always been part of human history. But the prophecy suggests they will intensify as the end approaches. The AD 70 event shows us what these signs look like when they converge on one time and place, culminating in judgment. It serves as a historical case study. It suggests that God's prophetic clock is ticking and that his warnings are not idle threats. The judgment on Jerusalem was a judgment in time, on one nation. The final judgment is described as a judgment on all nations at the end of time. The escape for the early Christians was physical. To a town called Pella, the ultimate escape for believers is described as being gathered to Christ himself. The lesson from the ruins of Jerusalem isn't to live in fear or try to predict dates from headlines. Jesus himself gave the most crucial warning, but concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son, but the Father only. The purpose of the signs isn't so we can know the day, but so we can recognize the season and live accordingly. The stunning accuracy of the prophecy fulfilled in AD 70 serves as validation for the prophecy yet to be fulfilled. It suggests history isn't just a random series of chaotic events, but a story heading toward a divinely appointed conclusion. The first-century Christians who, according to tradition, took Jesus' words seriously were saved from a horrific destruction. Their story is a powerful testament to the life-saving nature of heeding God's warnings. The prophecy of Matthew 24 then isn't just an ancient relic, it's a living document. It's a call to discernment to distinguish between the background noise of history and the intensifying birth pains of a new age. It's a call to endurance and, most of all, a call to be ready. Jesus ends his discourse with parables about watchfulness, urging his followers to live in a state of constant expectation. Jerusalem was devastated because, as the Gospels frame it, its people did not recognize the time of their visitation. The prophecy of its destruction stands as a permanent, chilling monument in history, a blueprint that warns and prepares us for the day when the Son of Man will return. The question it leaves for every one of us is simple: will we be ready?